The text message arrived at 6:47 p.m., just as I was lighting the candles for our 15th wedding anniversary dinner. Emergency work dinner. I'll make it up to you, Marta. I stared at my phone, watching the flickering flames dance across the screen, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not disappointment, not even surprise anymore. Just a weary recognition that this was who we'd become. My name is Nick Patterson, and I'm a financial manager for a mid-sized accounting firm in suburban Cleveland. 45 years old, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that disappears in crowds. The kind of man who fixes other people's money problems while his own life slowly crumbles around him. I'd spent 3 hours preparing Marta's favorite meal: herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, that expensive wine she'd been saving. The dining room looked like something from a magazine, complete with fresh flowers and our good china. I poured myself a glass of the wine and sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The house felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Our split-level ranch in Westbrook Heights had been our dream home once. Now it felt like a museum of better times, filled with photos of a couple who used to laugh together. My phone buzzed again. Not Marta this time, but an unknown number with a Cleveland area code. Thought you should know what your wife is really up to. Check the attached photos. My hands went numb. The first image showed Marta and a man I didn't recognize, sitting close together at Romano's, the Italian place where we'd had our first date. Her hand was on his thigh, her head thrown back in laughter. The second photo was a screenshot of text messages between them, filled with intimate details that made my stomach turn. Hotel room numbers, times, explicit descriptions of what they'd done together. The third attachment was a selfie. Marta and this stranger, tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit, kissing in what looked like a hotel room. She was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for Christmas. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. The candles kept flickering, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The salmon was getting cold. The wine tasted like vinegar now. Lucas Brennan, that was the name on the text thread. I recognized it vaguely. Marta had mentioned him a few times. A real estate agent she worked with on some advertising campaigns. Just business, she'd always said when his name came up. You know how these client dinners go. I did know. I knew exactly how they went. The anonymous tipster had included Lucas's business card in the photos. Brennan and Associates Real Estate. His office was downtown, not far from Marta's advertising agency. I memorized his face, sharp features, cocky smile, the kind of man who probably called everyone buddy and drove a BMW. I blew out the candles and scraped the dinner into the garbage disposal. The grinding sound seemed to echo through the empty house. Then I sat in my recliner and waited. Marta came home at 11:30, reeking of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. "Sorry about tonight, honey," she said, not meeting my eyes. You know how Peterson gets when a client starts making demands. We barely got out of there before midnight. Peterson was her boss, a workaholic who expected his team to be available 24/7. It was a plausible excuse. It might have even been partially true, but I could see the slight smudge of lipstick on her collar, the way her hair was mussed despite her attempts to smooth it down. "How was Romano's?" I asked quietly. She froze in the doorway to the kitchen. "What? Romano's? How was the food? You always said their chicken parmigiana was better than mine." "I don't know what you're talking about." But her voice had that careful, measured tone she used when she was lying. "We went to that steakhouse on Euclid. You know, the one with the terrible service." "Man," I nodded and smiled. "Of course, my mistake." She kissed my forehead, a perfunctory peck that felt like a goodbye, and headed upstairs. I listened to her shower running for 20 minutes, washing away the evidence of her betrayal. Then I opened my laptop and started researching Lucas Brennan. He was 38, divorced, no kids. His real estate company specialized in high-end properties. His social media was full of photos of expensive cars, exotic vacations, and beautiful women. The kind of man who probably had never worried about mortgage payments or whether his marriage was worth saving. I found his home address, his favorite restaurants, even his gym membership. In my line of work, you learn how to find information about people. Credit reports, property records, business filings. It's all public if you know where to look. The next morning, Marta left for work early, claiming she had a breakfast meeting with a new client. She kissed my cheek and told me she loved me, the words sliding off her tongue like she'd practiced them in the mirror. I watched her drive away in her silver Lexus, then got in my own car and followed her. She went straight to the Marriott downtown. I parked across the street and watched her walk into the lobby, checking her reflection in the glass doors. She was wearing a new outfit I'd never seen before, a black dress that hugged her curves and heels that made her legs look endless. Not exactly breakfast meeting attire. Lucas arrived 10 minutes later in a white BMW convertible. He handed his keys to the valet like he owned the place, then strutted into the hotel with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. I sat in my car for another hour, watching the windows of the hotel, imagining what they were doing up there. When they finally emerged, Marta's hair was disheveled and Lucas had loosened his tie. They kissed goodbye in the parking garage, a long, passionate embrace that made me want to vomit. Then they went their separate ways, back to their respective lives. I waited until Lucas got in his car, then followed him to a parking garage downtown. While he was in a meeting, I walked over to his BMW and keyed a long, deep scratch along the driver's side. Then I unscrewed the cap on a bottle of sardine oil I'd brought from home and poured it through the slightly open window, coating the leather seats. It was petty, juvenile, but watching that oil seep into his expensive upholstery felt better than anything had in months. I was walking back to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Nick? I turned around to see Rachel Morrison, Marta's best friend since college, standing by the garage elevator with a shocked expression on her face. She was holding a small suitcase and looked like she'd been crying. Rachel? What are you doing here? She glanced around nervously, then walked over to me. Rachel was 41, an elementary school teacher with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair she kept in a neat bun. She'd always been the quiet one in Marta's social circle, the designated driver who listened more than she talked. I could ask you the same thing, she said, nodding toward Lucas's car, though I think I already know the answer. My face burned with embarrassment. I don't know what you mean. The sardine oil was a nice touch, she said with a sad smile. Creative, non-violent. I respect that. I stared at her. How did you? I'm the one who sent you those photos. The words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the concrete pillar next to me for support, my legs suddenly unsteady. You? She nodded, tears starting to flow again. I've been watching this go on for months, Nick. Watching her lie to you. Watching you pretend everything was fine. I couldn't take it anymore. Why? The word came out as a croak. Because you're a good man. Because you deserve better. And because, she took a shaky breath, because I'm tired of watching the people I care about get destroyed by selfish assholes. She held up her suitcase. I just left my husband. Found out he's been cheating on me with his secretary. Cliché, right? 30-year-old blonde with fake breasts and a laugh like a hyena. I felt like the world was tilting sideways. Rachel, I'm so sorry. Don't be. I should have left him years ago. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Look, I know this is crazy, but I don't have anywhere else to go. My sister lives in California, and I can't afford a hotel long term. Would it be possible? Could I maybe stay on your couch for a few days? Just until I figure things out. I looked at this woman I'd known for 15 years but never really seen. Marta's quiet friend who brought homemade cookies to parties and remembered everyone's birthdays, who was apparently brave enough to blow up her own marriage and mine in the same week. Yeah, I said. Yeah, of course. That's how Rachel Morrison became my partner in revenge. She moved into my guest room that afternoon, while Marta was at work. We didn't talk about what we were doing or why. We just started planning. Rachel knew things about Marta that I'd never suspected. Her insecurities, her secrets, the cruel things she said about people behind their backs. She keeps a journal, Rachel told me over dinner that night, on her old laptop, the one she uses for personal stuff. Password protected, but I've seen her type it in. It's Lucas 2023 now, by the way. Used to be your anniversary date. That hurt more than I expected it to. What kind of journal? The kind where she writes down every piece of gossip, every embarrassing secret, every weakness she can exploit later. She's got dirt on everyone, Nick. Her boss, her coworkers, even her own parents. She calls it her insurance policy. I thought about the woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my jokes and fall asleep in my arms watching movies. When had she become someone who collected secrets like weapons? There's something else, Rachel said quietly. She's been telling people you're having problems. Mental health issues. She's setting up a narrative where you're the unstable one. So when she leaves you for Lucas, everyone will understand. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I actually laughed. A bitter, ugly sound that surprised us both. She's good, I said. I have to give her credit. She's really good. That night, while Marta worked late again, Rachel and I broke into her laptop. The journal was worse than I'd imagined. Page after page of vicious observations about everyone in her life. She called her mother a pathetic drunk who peaked in high school. She described her boss as a walking sexual harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. She'd written detailed accounts of her friends' marital problems, their financial troubles, their deepest fears. And the entries about me were devastating. According to Marta, I was boring, sexually inadequate, and too stupid to realize what's happening right under his nose. She wrote about planning to divorce me once she got the promotion she was angling for, about how she and Lucas were going to move to Chicago together, about how relieved she'd be to finally trade up. "I'm sorry," Rachel whispered, reading over my shoulder. "I'm so sorry you had to see this." But I wasn't sorry. For the first time in months, I felt clear-headed. The woman I'd been trying to save my marriage with didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. "Don't be sorry," I said, copying the journal files to a flash drive. "Be ready." The next phase of our plan began at the Westbrook Heights Community Center's monthly charity auction. It was the kind of event Marta lived for, a chance to see and be seen, to network with potential clients, to show off her perfect life to our neighbors. She'd bought a new dress for the occasion, spent 2 hours on her hair and makeup. Lucas was there too, of course. Coincidentally, bidding on the same items as Marta, making small talk with her friends, playing the role of the charming stranger who just happened to keep running into Mrs. Patterson at social events. I watched them from across the room, noting how they managed to stand just close enough to touch without being obvious about it. How they shared secret smiles when they thought no one was looking. They were good at this game. They'd had plenty of practice. Rachel appeared at my elbow, elegant in a simple blue dress that made her eyes sparkle. She'd let her hair down for once, and I was surprised to realize how beautiful she was when she wasn't hiding behind her usual conservative teacher persona. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded and walked over to the bar, where Lucas was ordering his third whiskey of the evening. He was the kind of drunk who got louder and more confident with each drink. The kind who thought everyone wanted to hear his opinions about sports and politics and women. "Lucas Brennan, right?" I extended my hand with my friendliest smile. "Nick Patterson. I think you know my wife, Marta." His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, calculation, forced casualness. "Oh, sure, Marta's husband. Great to finally meet you, buddy. She talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope." I signaled the bartender for a drink. "Scotch, neat. Make it a double." "Of course. She's crazy about you, man. Really crazy." He was overcompensating, his voice too loud, his smile too wide. "You're a lucky guy." "I am indeed." I raised my glass in a toast. To lucky guys and the women who make us that way. We clinked glasses, and I watched him drink. The scotch was expensive, smooth. I wanted him relaxed for what came next. "So, real estate, huh? Must be exciting, showing all those beautiful homes to beautiful clients?" I let my voice carry just a hint of innuendo. "It has its perks," he said with a wink. "Though I have to be careful. Some of these suburban housewives, they get ideas. Ideas. You know how it is. Husband's at work all day, wife's bored, looking for a little excitement. I'm just trying to sell houses, but they're shopping for something else entirely." He leaned closer, whiskey breath hot on my face. "If you know what I mean." I knew exactly what he meant, and so did the small digital recorder in my jacket pocket. "That must be awkward," I said, "having to turn down all those desperate housewives." He laughed, a ugly sound that made my skin crawl. "Who says I turned them down? Life's short, buddy. Sometimes you've got to take your opportunities where you find them, even if they're married. Especially if they're married. Married women know how to keep their mouths shut. They've got as much to lose as I do." He finished his drink and signaled for another. "Besides, if their husbands were taking care of business at home, these ladies wouldn't be looking elsewhere, right?" I wanted to hit him, wanted to grab him by his expensive tie and smash his smug face into the bar. Instead, I smiled and nodded, like we were old friends sharing locker room talk. "You're probably right," I said. "Can't blame a guy for taking advantage of opportunity." "Exactly. You get it." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Most guys are too uptight about this stuff. Too worried about what people think. But you seem cool, Nick. I like you." "I like you too, Lucas. In fact, I'd love to continue this conversation sometime. Maybe you could tell me more about these opportunities you've been taking advantage of." "Oh, Something in my tone must have gotten through his whiskey haze, because his eyes sharpened slightly. What do you mean? Oh, I mean Romano's. I mean the Marriott. I mean my wife's red dress and your BMW and the selfies you've been taking together. The color drained from his face. He looked around frantically, probably hoping Marta was close enough to help him, but she was across the room talking to the mayor's wife. Oh, I don't know what you think I think I know exactly what's been going on, I said quietly. The question is, what are we going to do about it? He straightened up, trying to regain his composure. Look, buddy, I don't know who's been filling your head with crazy ideas, but I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos Rachel had sent me. The one of him and Marta kissing in the hotel parking garage. Crazy ideas? He stared at the photo, his jaw working like he was trying to find words. Finally, he looked up at me with something like defiance in his eyes. So what? You want to fight me? Make a scene? Go ahead, see how that works out for you. Fight you? I laughed. Lucas, I'm a financial manager. I solve problems with spreadsheets and patience, not my fists. But I am curious about one thing. What? How's your car running lately? Notice any unusual odors? His face went red. You son of a bitch, that was you? Sardines are surprisingly hard to get out of leather, I said conversationally, especially when they've had time to really soak in. But I'm sure your detailer will figure something out eventually. He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same scent I'd been smelling on my wife for months. You think you're clever? You think some juvenile prank is going to scare me off? Your wife came to me, asshole. She's the one who wanted this. She's the one who's tired of being married to a boring, pathetic. I threw my drink in his face. It wasn't planned. It wasn't part of any strategy Rachel and I had discussed. It was pure instinct, the culmination of months of humiliation and betrayal and rage finally boiling over. The expensive scotch hit him square in the eyes, and he stumbled backward, sputtering and cursing. His white shirt was soaked, his perfectly styled hair dripping. Everyone in the immediate vicinity turned to stare. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I said loudly, grabbing napkins from the bar. How clumsy of me. Here, let me help you clean that up. But Lucas wasn't interested in my help. He was backing away from me, wiping his face with his sleeve, looking around at all the people staring at us. You're insane, he hissed. You're absolutely insane. Just clumsy, I corrected, still holding out the napkins. Though I suppose when you're dealing with someone who's been screwing your wife, a little clumsiness is understandable. I said it just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. I saw Marta across the room, her face pale with shock and anger, pushing through the crowd toward us. Lucas saw her too. He straightened his shoulders, tried to salvage some dignity. This isn't over, he said quietly. No, I agreed. It's really just getting started. He stalked off toward the men's room, leaving a trail of whiskey-scented droplets behind him. Marta reached me a moment later, her eyes blazing with fury. What the hell was that? She demanded in a low voice. An accident, I said innocently. I was talking to your friend Lucas about real estate opportunities, and I got a little too animated with my gestures. You know how I am when I get excited about investment properties. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. We're leaving. Now. But the auction's not over. I was hoping to bid on that weekend at the lake house. Now, Nick. I shrugged and followed her out to the parking lot, where Lucas was standing by his BMW, the one that still reeked of sardines, despite multiple professional cleanings, talking angrily on his phone. This is not how we discussed handling this, Marta said as we got in her car. Handling what? You know what. Don't play dumb with me. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, even angry, even caught in the middle of betraying everything we'd built together. She was beautiful. I'd fallen in love with that face 20 years ago, married it 15 years ago, and somehow convinced myself I could keep it happy forever. I honestly don't know what you're talking about, I said, but if you want to discuss something, I'm all ears. She started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot without another word. We drove home in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us like a physical force. Rachel was waiting for us when we got home, sitting on the front porch with a cup of tea and a concerned expression. How was the auction? She asked innocently. Fine, Marta said curtly. What are you doing here, Rachel? I thought you were staying at your sister's. Change of plans, Rachel said, not moving from her spot on the porch swing. Your husband was kind enough to offer me the guest room while I sort out my divorce. Marta's eyes flicked between Rachel and me, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out what this new development meant for her carefully laid plans. "That's very generous of Nick," she said finally. "Though I'm not sure it's appropriate, given everything you're going through. Wouldn't you be more comfortable somewhere else?" "Actually, I'm very comfortable here," Rachel said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nick's been wonderful. Very supportive. Very understanding about the challenges of marriage." The two women stared at each other for a long moment, and I realized I was watching 15 years of friendship die in real time. Whatever happened next, whatever choices we all made, there was no going back to the way things were. "Well," Marta said finally, "I suppose we should all get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." She was right about that. Tomorrow was going to change everything. I woke up the next morning to the sound of raised voices coming from the kitchen. Marta and Rachel were facing off across the breakfast table like gunfighters at high noon, coffee cups forgotten between them. "Don't know what game you think you're playing," Marta was saying, "but I won't let you manipulate him like this." "Manipulate him?" Rachel's voice was incredulous. "That's rich, coming from you. What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know about Lucas. I know about the hotels, the lies, the journal where you write about what a pathetic husband Nick is, while you're planning your escape to Chicago." Marta went very still. "You've been going through my things. Someone had to. Someone had to care enough about Nick to tell him the truth." "The truth?" Marta laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is that you've been in love with my husband for years, and now you're using my marriage problems as an excuse to move in on him." I stepped into the kitchen before Rachel could respond. Both women turned to look at me, their faces flushed with anger and something that might have been fear. "Good morning, ladies," I said calmly, walking over to the coffee pot. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Nick," Marta started, but I held up a hand. "I heard most of that," I said, pouring myself a cup. "And I have to say, it's fascinating to finally hear you both speak honestly about what's been going on." Marta's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, human. "Nick, I can explain." Can you? Can you explain Lucas? Can you explain the journal entries where you call me boring and sexually inadequate? Can you explain why you've been telling our friends I'm having mental health problems?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing to say, and we all knew it. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "Pack your things and go. This is my house too." "Actually, it's not. It's my house. I bought it before we got married, remember? You never wanted your name on the deed because you were worried about your credit score." It was a detail I'd forgotten until last night, when Rachel and I were going through all our legal options. Amazing how useful it is to have a financial manager's attention to detail when your life falls apart. Marta stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You can't just throw me out. I have rights. You have the right to find somewhere else to live, preferably with Lucas, since you two have been planning your future together anyway." "How did you—" She stopped herself, but it was too late. "How did I know about Chicago? About the promotion you're expecting? About the apartment Lucas found for you in Lincoln Park?" I smiled. "You'd be surprised what you can learn when you start paying attention." The truth was, Rachel had figured out most of it by putting together pieces from Marta's journal and her own observations. But I liked the way Marta was looking at me now, like I was someone to be reckoned with, instead of someone to be managed. "I need time," she said finally, "to find a place, to figure things out." "You have until Sunday. That's 4 days." "Nick, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can—" "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended. "We can't. This isn't a rough patch, Marta. This isn't something we can fix with better communication or date nights. You made a choice. Now I'm making mine." She looked at Rachel, who was sitting quietly at the table, watching this entire exchange with careful eyes. "This is your fault," Marta said. "You poisoned him against me." "I told him the truth," Rachel replied. "Something you should have done months ago." Marta grabbed her purse and keys from the counter. "I'm going to work. When I get home tonight, I expect her to be gone." "She's staying," I said. "You're leaving." The door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. Rachel and I sat in the sudden silence, listening to the Lexus screech out of the driveway. "That went well," Rachel said dryly. I laughed, despite everything. "Better than I expected, actually. I thought there'd be more crying." "Oh, there will be. Just not here, not in front of us. She'll save the tears for Lucas, or for anyone else who might be useful to her." I studied Rachel's face, really seeing her for the first time since this whole mess started. Marta wasn't entirely wrong, was she? About you being in love with me? Rachel's cheeks turned pink, but she didn't look away. Would it matter if she was right? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. I set down my coffee cup and walked over to where she was sitting. I'm not exactly a prize catch right now, Rachel. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I'm probably going to lose half my friends, and I just threw a drink in a man's face at a charity auction. That was my favorite part, she said with a grin. You should have seen his expression. You were watching? I was recording. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video of Lucas stumbling backward, dripping with scotch, while I offered him napkins with exaggerated concern. I thought we might need evidence of his reaction to being confronted. I stared at her. You recorded that? I recorded all of it. The conversation at the bar, the drink throwing, everything. Lucas Brennan just confessed to sleeping with married women as a hobby, and we have it all on video. What are you planning to do with it? She smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it wasn't a nice smile. I'm planning to ruin him. Over the next 3 days, Rachel and I became a team in ways I'd never been a team with Marta. We planned, we strategized, we executed a campaign of social and professional destruction that was surgical in its precision. First, we sent the recording of Lucas's confession to his business partners, along with copies of his text messages with Marta. Brennan and Associates Real Estate had built their reputation on family values and community trust. Having a partner who bragged about seducing married clients was not good for business. Then we leaked selected portions of Marta's journal to her social circle. Not everything, we weren't monsters, but enough to show her friends exactly what she really thought of them. The entry where she called Jennifer Walsh a desperate wannabe who peaked in high school was particularly effective, since Jennifer was the unofficial queen bee of their group. We sent Marta's boss the journal entries about him, the ones where she detailed his drinking problem and his inappropriate comments about female employees. We sent her mother the entry where Marta described her as a pathetic drunk living in the past. Each revelation was carefully timed, carefully targeted. We weren't trying to destroy everyone. We were trying to destroy Marta's support network, to isolate her the way she'd been isolating me. By Friday, Lucas had been forced out of his real estate company. By Saturday, Marta's friends had stopped returning her calls. Her boss had put her on administrative leave, pending an investigation into her unprofessional conduct and potential harassment of colleagues. Sunday morning, Marta came home to pack her things. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in a week, hollow-eyed, pale, her usually perfect hair hanging limp around her shoulders. I hope you're happy, she said as she dragged suitcases down the stairs. I'm getting there, I replied honestly. You've destroyed my life, my career, my friendships, everything. I didn't destroy anything. I just showed people who you really are. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at me with something that might have been respect. I underestimated you, she said. I thought you were weak. So did I. And her? She nodded toward the kitchen, where Rachel was making breakfast. What happens now? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Marta picked up her suitcases and walked toward the door. Then she paused and turned back to me. For what it's worth, Nick, I did love you once. Before all this, before Lucas, before everything went wrong, I did love you. I know, I said. I loved you too. She nodded and walked out of my life forever. Rachel appeared in the doorway as Marta's car disappeared down the street. How do you feel? She asked. Empty, relieved, scared. I looked at her, this woman who'd blown up her own life to save mine. Grateful. She walked over and took my hand. Lucas called me this morning. What did he want? To apologize, to beg me not to release any more information about him. Apparently, he's lost 3 major clients this week, and his ex-wife is threatening to take him back to court for more alimony. What did you tell him? I told him that if he ever contacts you, me, or anyone in our families again, I'll send everything we have to the local news stations. She smiled. I don't think we'll be hearing from him anymore. We stood there in the wreckage of my old life, holding hands like teenagers, and I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Rachel Morrison was the strongest person I'd ever met. She'd watched her best friend betray her husband, watched her own marriage crumble, and instead of retreating or giving up, she'd declared war on everyone who'd hurt the people she cared about. So what now? I asked. Now we start over, both of us, together if you want. I thought about everything that had happened, everything we'd done, everything we'd destroyed and built in the space of a week. It should have felt wrong, moving from one relationship to another so quickly. It should have felt like revenge sex, or a rebound, or a dozen other unhealthy things. Instead, it felt like coming home. 6 months later, Rachel and I were married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. My kids, Amelia and Ross, were there. They'd eventually come around once they realized what their mother had really been doing. Rachel's sister flew in from California. A few friends who'd stuck by us through the scandal. Lucas Brennan had left Cleveland, according to the local gossip network. Some said he'd moved to Phoenix. Others claimed he was selling insurance in Tampa. I didn't care where he'd gone, as long as it was far away from us. Marta had taken a job with a small agency in Columbus, starting over at a fraction of her previous salary. She'd sent me a card on my birthday. Nothing dramatic, just, "Happy birthday, Nick. I hope you're well." I'd thrown it away without responding, but I'd kept it long enough to notice that her handwriting looked shaky, uncertain. Rachel and I bought a new house together, a craftsman bungalow with a big front porch and room for a garden. We painted the walls bright colors, hung photos of our travels, filled it with laughter and music and all the things my marriage to Marta had been missing. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if we'd gone too far, if destroying two people's lives, even people who'd betrayed us, had been the right thing to do. But then I'd look at Rachel, curled up next to me, reading a book or grading papers, and I'd remember what it felt like to be truly seen and valued by another person. We'd all made our choices. Marta had chosen Lucas over our marriage. Lucas had chosen to brag about his conquests to the wrong person. Rachel had chosen to risk everything to save me from a relationship that was slowly killing my soul. And I had chosen to stop being the kind of man who accepted betrayal with a sad smile and a shrug. The reckoning door had opened, and we'd all walked through it into whatever came next. Some of us had emerged stronger. Others had been broken by what they'd found on the other side. But we'd all learned the same lesson. Actions have consequences. Secrets have power. And sometimes the quiet person in the corner is the most dangerous one in the room. As I locked the door of our new house that first night, Rachel's hand warm in mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The kind that comes not from avoiding conflict, but from facing it head on and discovering you're stronger than you ever imagined. The war was over. We had won.